You may be asking who this demonstration is for. You might be an IT professional or just an end user, or you may be someone in a management or training position. You also may be here because you currently work with a SharePoint 2010 system and just want to get a little more basic information about it, or you may be on a previous version of SharePoint and are just interested in 2010, or maybe you don't even use SharePoint at all, but just want to get an overview of its capabilities. This demonstration is intended for a broad audience and should meet all of those needs. If your organization is like most, you have information that needs to be managed and shared. You might do this through tools such as shared disk drives, email and calendaring programs like Outlook, or other types of systems. But you may also be looking for a more efficient way to manage this information in a more comprehensive environment. And it would be beneficial if that could be done without the heavy use of technical resources. SharePoint can meet that challenge. It was made with end users and power users in mind and is intended to be a platform that meets a wide variety of needs for a wide variety of users. SharePoint can empower users. They can improve their information sharing, collaboration, and work processes on their own once the system's set up and running. This gives them more flexibility and they get more benefit out of the system than something like a simple shared drive system. So first, let me give you an overview of the SharePoint system. SharePoint 2010 is available in 3 editions. First, there's Foundation. SharePoint Foundation provides a core set of collaboration and information sharing tools, and there's no additional cost to install SharePoint Foundation on a licensed Windows server. Also, if your users are already licensed to connect to that server through your network, there's no additional user licenses. Server Standard builds on Foundation and provides additional tools. There is a cost for installing Server Standard, and there are user licenses for this version. Next, there's Server Enterprise, and Server Enterprise offers even more tools and options, especially in the areas of business intelligence. This demonstration features tools available in SharePoint Foundation. Everything else in SharePoint is built on these tools, and many organizations find Foundation alone sufficient to meet their needs. Next, here's an outline of what our demonstration is going to contain. We have a website set up for a company called AdventureWorks Bikes, and they use SharePoint Foundation 2010 for information sharing and collaboration. We'll look at some of the tools that are available in Foundation, then we'll look at some specific features of SharePoint. First, we'll look at libraries, and this is where documents can be stored, similar to a shared drive. Libraries offer many more powerful options that turn document storage into actual document management. Next, we'll take a look at lists. And lists are easy ways to capture, track, and report on data without the use of a full-featured database program. We'll also look at users and permissions. This is an area where a site owner can take control of this process and not have to involve someone from the IT department who might do more enterprise-wide permissions management. SharePoint 2010 also includes a search feature, and we'll look at the options available there. We'll also look at how you can change the look and feel of a website through some out-of-the-box tools. Here we are on the AdventureWorks Bikes SharePoint website. What we're looking at now is the home page of the top level site, and in the middle of the page here is what would be considered the body of the page. This is highly customizable. Right now it has just a title and a graphic and a links list, but we can change this to contain any type of information we like, and we'll be doing some of that during this demonstration. This links list over on the right is a good example of a key feature of SharePoint, and that is something called a list. And we'll be looking at a lot of different kinds of lists in this demonstration, but this is a really simple one. It simply provides links to various websites that the users might find of interest. At the very top of the page are some tools, and the tools that are available to you will depend on the permissions you have on the site, and we'll look at some of these in a few minutes. Next, we have what's commonly referred to as the breadcrumb. This is going to give you a trail of where you've been on the site or where the page exists in the site hierarchy and give you a way to navigate back through different levels of the site. And we'll see that change as we navigate through different sections. Next is what's commonly referred to as the top link bar, and this provides links to subsites. Each department at AdventureWorks Bytes has its own subsite. Again, though, this could be links to anything. I could have a link to an external website or more specific sections of the site. You'll see that the links are repeated over here on the left. This left navigation bar is commonly referred to as the quick launch bar. In addition to linking to the subsites, we also have links to other features that exist at this level, including a company calendar. So I'm going to click on the calendar link, and I'll see that a calendar comes up with appointments, and these appointments are color-coded because this is a master calendar that is rolling up information from calendars that exist on the different department subsites. So this gives me one aggregated calendar that's showing me items from a number of other calendars. And this is a great feature of SharePoint 2010. When we navigated to the calendar, we saw that this section up at the top changed. For one thing, we have some different tabs available now, and I could click on events, for example, and this gives me some tools to work with specific events on the calendar. Or I can click on the calendar tab, and this gives me tools to work with the calendar as a whole. You'll see that SharePoint 2010 uses the ribbon technology that's available in Office 2007 and Office 2010. By clicking on the Browse tab, that takes me back to my breadcrumb, and I can see now that I'm on the company event calendar. I could also see that up here in the Browser tab, and I see that I'm on something called Calendar. If I click on this drop down, I see that I have different views available. These are different ways to look at the same information organized in a different fashion. So for example, if I click on All Events, this shows me all the events on the calendar in a list format, and recurring events show as a single item. Or I could switch to current events, and this shows me a similar list, but the recurring events are spelled out, and it's only showing me items that are in the future. It's not showing me items that have already passed. I could modify any of these views because I'm a system administrator. I could create new views. So if there were other ways that my users wanted to be able to look at these events, I could create views that specified that. For now, though, I'm just going to flip back to the regular calendar view. Now with the breadcrumb, I can navigate back to the home page of the site. I could also click on the home link here on the top link bar. That would take me to the same place. Or I can use the little navigate up folder icon, and this will also show me where in the site hierarchy I am and allow me to move up a level. So I'll use that to go back to the home page. Now let's take a look at one of the subsites. So if I click on IT, that's going to take me to the Information Technology subsite, and it looks very similar to the home page. I've got a graphic over here, I've got some text. I have an announcements list displayed in the body section, and we'll actually be doing that later in the demo on the home page. In addition to having a calendar, I also have a task list on this site. So if I look at tasks, again I'll see that it's very similar to the task list that you might see in Outlook. The difference is, of course, that this is a shared task list. So I can look at tasks for multiple people. All the people on my team have these tasks assigned to them, and we can all track our progress on different tasks, mark them as completed when they're finished, and so on. To use the task list, like any other list, of course I have different views available. So I could, for example, choose my tasks, and this matches up that Assign To field with my login information and shows me only the tasks that I'm responsible for. Or perhaps I'd want to see just the active tasks. All tasks showed me things that were complete, and in this particular case, I only want to see the ones that still need to be worked on. So just like we saw with the calendar, I could modify any of these views, or I could create new ones if there wasn't an out-of-the-box view that met my needs. Now I'm going to go back to all tasks, and another nice feature of SharePoint lists is that any user can sort and filter these on the fly. So for example, if I wanted to only see the high priority tasks, I can use this drop down to filter for that. And I get the little funnel icon to show me that a filter's been applied, and then I can remove it. By default, these are stored in order of start date, but I might want to see them in order of due date, so I can apply a sort, and so on and so forth. So this starts to show you some of the power of SharePoint lists. Now on a list that's this size, it's pretty easy to just eyeball what's there, but imagine a list that had dozens or maybe even hundreds of items. The ability to sort and filter either on the fly or through different views is a pretty powerful feature. Now let's take a look at libraries. So if I click on Purchasing Guidelines, this takes me to a library that's been set up, and I've got several documents here. A library is simply a way to store either Office documents or other types of computer files. The difference with SharePoint, though, is that it's a much more powerful document management system than you would find with just a shared drive. So one of the things we'll be doing in the next section is exploring some of these features in more detail. For now, though, I want to go back to the home page for the IT subsite, so I'll just click on IT over here. So now let's take a more detailed look at libraries. We've already seen the Purchasing Guidelines library, but for this demonstration, I want to create a new library. So I'm going to go to Site Actions and create New Document Library. Again, I can do this because I'm a site administrator. This particular library is to store tutorials. The IT department is responsible for creating tutorials for the software that the company uses. So I'm just going to call this tutorials. That's pretty obvious. Next, it's asking me if I want to display this library on the quick launch. Do I want to have a link to the library in that left navigation bar? I'll say yes, of course. The next question is about versioning. Do I want to turn on versioning for this library? And we'll talk about versioning separately. I'm going to say no at this point, but just know that it can be turned on later if you like. Then the next option is about the document template. Every library has a new button. I can create a new document right there on the SharePoint site without having to create it separately somewhere else and upload it. And the default is Microsoft Word. In this case, our tutorials are going to be PowerPoint presentations, so I'm going to choose PowerPoint as my default template. Now I'll click Create. So here I am in my tutorials library. It's open with the ribbons activated because the assumption is I probably want to make some additional changes. But for now, I'm going to just upload some documents that I already have created. And the most obvious way to do that is by clicking on the Add Document link. So I'll click on that, and I can browse. And I've got several documents to choose from. In this case, I just want to upload one. So I'll select that one and click Open, and click OK. And here is my Excel tutorial. Now, what if I'd wanted to upload all of those documents? I have two others that I need to get into this library. So SharePoint gives me a tool to upload multiple documents at one time. When I clicked on the Add Document link, in the dialog box, there's a link here for Upload Multiple Files. So I could just click on that, and it takes me to a slightly different dialog box. But I'm going to cancel that and show you that SharePoint provides another way to upload documents. If I click on the Documents tab, I have an Upload Document button here. So if I just clicked on the button, it would give me that same dialog box I got when I clicked Add Document. But if I use the drop down, I see that it will take me directly to the Upload Multiple Documents dialog box. So I'll do that. Now, if I had a larger screen and I could see my Windows Explorer window, I could actually drag those documents from that window to this dialog box, and that works really well. But in this case, I don't want to fumble around with Windows, so I'm just going to click the Browse for Files Instead link. So either of these methods work. So I need to now upload the PowerPoint and the Word document. So in this case, I can use my Control click or my Shift click to select multiple items. So I'll click on PowerPoint and then I'll hold down my Control key on my keyboard and click Word. And now both of those are selected and I see the names here in the file name box, and I'll click Open. Now both documents are loaded and ready to be uploaded to the library. I'll click OK. And when the status for all of them is done, then I can click the Done button. And now there are all three documents uploaded in the library ready to read or work with. Now if I hover over the name of any of these documents, I'll see that I get a drop-down arrow. If I click on that, here are some options for working with this individual document. Let's view the properties. So in this Properties dialog box, I see things that are familiar to me from looking at documents in something like a shared drive or the hard drive on your computer. For example, I get to see when it was created and who created it. I also get a last modified date and time and the login information of the person who last modified it. In this case, they're the same because it's a new document. The name of the file, I could have the title of the file that's different from the name, and some other tools up here that we'll be exploring in a few minutes. So I'll click on Close. Now if I click on the name of the document, I'll get a dialog box asking me if I want to open it, read only, or in edit mode. So I just want to see it. I don't need to edit it, so I'll click OK with read only selected. I can see at the title bar up at the top that it is in read-only mode, but notice this nice big fat yellow toolbar. If I changed my mind and needed to actually edit this presentation, and I had the permissions to do so, I can click the Edit Presentation button. So I'll do that because I do want to make a small change. This puts the presentation in edit mode, and all I want to do is change this text from lowercase to uppercase. So with that change made, I'll save. Now notice that the Save button actually has the little refresh, recycle symbol on it, and this is just a reminder that I'm refreshing the version that's out on the server. So I'll click that, and now that that's finished, I can now close Excel. Now I'm back on my library page and I see that the document has been modified. When I clicked on the Excel tutorial, the full client version of PowerPoint that's installed on this computer opened up. With many implementations of SharePoint, an additional piece of software is installed called Office Web Apps, and this provides a simplified version of Word, Excel, and PowerPoint that opens up right in the browser. It allows for viewing documents and also some basic editing capabilities. This particular installation of SharePoint does not have that additional software installed, but it's very, very common in SharePoint environments. So let's take a closer look at lists. I'm going to come over here and click on the task list that we saw earlier. And I see that I have a number of tasks already entered in this list, and I could edit any one of them. You notice as I pass over the names of the tasks, I get a drop down similar to what we saw with the library. similar items in the drop-down menu. I can view the item, I can edit it. So I'm going to go in and say that one of these tasks has already been completed. I was behind in keeping the task item up to date, so I'm making up for lost time a little bit. If I click on the name of the item, it's going to open in view mode, but I want to hop directly to edit mode. So I'll say that this task has been completed. And you can take a look at some of the other columns that are available. This is just the out-of-the-box task list. It hasn't been modified in any way, but it is possible to modify out-of-the-box lists. I could customize it. But for now, I've just chosen completed. I'm going to click Save, and now my item is updated. As we saw earlier, I could switch views with my view drop-down up here at the top. I could create a new view. I could modify this view. We saw that with the libraries. It works exactly the same way with lists. So in addition to modifying an existing task, of course, I can create new ones. And just as we saw with the library, I have an Add New link down at the bottom. Instead of uploading a document, it just simply opens the dialog box for me to enter the new task. So the task I'm going to create is to upload this video that I'm making. It's a high priority item. It's in progress, and I'd say I'm about 50% finished. And this is my task, so I'll put my own ID in this field. And notice that this is a special field called a people or group field, and it's tied to Active Directory. It's tied to the user information in the system, so that part of what comes along for the ride is information about my login and my email address, and that becomes very helpful in using specific SharePoint features. The due date for this task, I'll say I want it done by the end of this week. And I actually started it last week. So I'll click on Save. So now there's my new task with all the information about where we are. As we saw earlier, I can use my View menu to choose other views, for example, Active Tasks Only, My Tasks Only, and I can modify those views or create new ones. So as I mentioned, you can modify the default settings in any of the out-of-the-box lists, such as tasks or calendars, and we're going to do that now. The IT calendar has already been customized, so we're going to go over to the accounting subsite and make some changes to the calendar here. So when I come to the calendar tab and go to list settings, again, I see my columns for the events, and I have this category column. So every event can be flagged with a specific category. And if I look at the definition of the categories, I'll see that some of them are applicable and some of them aren't really that helpful, especially for a business. So I'm going to modify this. Meeting is good. We don't need to specify any particular work hours. Everything we do is business, so I'll delete that. It will be good to flag holidays on the calendar. Get together, I don't really like that term, so I'm going to change it to social. Perhaps we want to have maybe happy hour gatherings or a department picnic or something like that. There doesn't need to be a gift item on the calendar. Birthdays, we'll keep up with birthdays, and even anniversaries, we'll put people's work anniversary on here. I also want to add deadlines as a calendar item. So I'll click OK and go back to the accounting calendar. So I want to put a meeting on here. We want to add our staff meetings. Staff meetings happen on the first Tuesday of the month. So I'm going to come up here and just click the add link on that date. And that happens at 9 a.m. for an hour. And I'll give it a category. These are the categories that we just edited. I'll click meeting and save. So that particular item, if I go to the next month, I'll see that it's not on November. And I want it to happen every month. So I need to make this a recurring item. So I'll click on it again and click the edit button. So now I can scroll down here and check the box to make this a repeating event. And when I do that, the screen updates and now gives me the recurrence fields. This happens monthly. Just like Outlook, if you've ever done this in Outlook, it's the same process. And it's the first Tuesday of every month. And I'll click Save. So now when I go to November, I'll see that there it is on the first Tuesday. So it's a fairly simple matter to modify the fields that are already in place. Just like we created a new library, you can also create brand new lists that don't fit a particular pre-made template. So let's go back to the IT site and do that. So I'm going to click on Browse to expose my breadcrumb and my navigation bars. Click IT. So now here on the IT subsite, I want to create a new list that's going to help track help requests. So anything that you've been currently doing through email or through a spreadsheet or even a Word document where you're trying to track a process, track requests, you can do that with a SharePoint list. So to create a custom list, I need to come up to Site Actions and click on More Options. This dialog box shows me all the new things I can create here in SharePoint Foundation. Different kinds of sub-site workspaces, different kinds of lists and libraries. I can filter for lists. And so I can see that in addition to calendar and tasks that we've already looked at, I could create a contacts list. I could create an issue tracking list. There's my links list, my task list. But what I want to do is so different from any of these templates that I just need to start from scratch. So I'm going to click the Custom List option. I could just give it a name and click Create, but I'm going to click More Options so I make sure that I set up everything I want right here at the beginning. So I'm just going to call this Requests. Do I want to display this on the quick launch? Yes. And I'll click Create. So here I am in my new request list, and as you can see, it only has one column, Title. So it's up to me to build out the other columns. So I'll go to List Settings and click Create Column. So the first column that I want to create is the location of the user. So I'll call that Location. Now I might have a list of offices or suites or cubicles or something like that that I could draw from. But in this case I don't, and I'm just going to leave it as a single line of text. I'll leave it up to the user to type in their location. I want this to be part of the default view, so I'll just leave that checked and click OK. I also want the user to indicate which department they work for. So I'll create a column called Department, and it will be a choice field. And what are my departments? I have Accounting, Human Resources, IT, Marketing, production. I also have administration. They're not really represented by a subsite, but they're a department. Again, I don't want a default choice selected, so I'll delete that and click OK. Next, I want the user to indicate who they are. I could use the created by field that SharePoint automatically populates, but I know that in some cases the person who needs help isn't always going to be the person who's filling out the form. So I need to find out who specifically this request is for. And this is where I'll use that person or group field, because I want not just their name, but their login information. And there are lots of options there. I just accepted the defaults. I'd like for the user to categorize the request. So I want them to select whether this is a problem, a question, or a request for new service. Just a few more. I also want a description field. Give them an opportunity to explain the problem in more detail. And then we need some fields for us to use to track the status of the request. So one will be called status, and it will also be a choice. This is similar to the statuses we had available in the task list. In this case, I'll leave not started as the default because new requests by definition will not have been started yet. So in that case, it's okay to have a default selection. Now I need to indicate who is going to take care of this request. So I'll have an assigned to field. Again, it'll be a person or group. And I'm going to restrict it to only people in the IT members SharePoint permissions group. I could leave it all users, which is the default, but I know that anyone who's assigned to work on this is going to be in this group. Finally, a resolution to give the IT staff person a space to write out what was done to fulfill this request. Okay, so there are the items in my request list system. And now I'll go out to the main page for the request list. And I can see I've got a lot of columns displaying here. I might want to clean that up and not have quite so much information crammed into this one view, but that's something I might do later. But let's just test out our request system. So I'm going to click on New Item, and I'm going to put in a request for myself. So the title is My Monitor is Fading. And I'll say I'm in Building A, and I'm in the IT department, and I'll put my information here. And the category is it's a problem. Okay, and I'm not really going to be assigning this, even though I'm in the IT department. Someone on the hardware team is going to take a look at this, so I'll leave those blank and I'll click Save. So now there is my request for someone to come look at my monitor. Now this request system can work fairly well, but one problem your users might run across is how do they know when a new request has been posted? SharePoint has a number of ways to take care of that, but one of the simplest is through something called an alert. So any user can set up an alert to notify them when a new item has been posted to a list or a library, or if something about those items has changed. So let's say I wanted to set up an alert for myself for when new items get posted. So the process would be the same for any other user with one minor difference. So I'm going to go to the List tab, and here I have my Alert Me button. So I'll just click that. And it tells me the name of the list or the library that this is for, and this will actually be part of the title of the email that I get. And it assumes that I'm trying to set up an alert for myself. Now, because I have a high level of permissions on this site, I could fill in other people to receive alerts according to the criteria I'm going to set up. And I might do that if I'm setting something up for my team. I might load my team into this field. For users who don't have that high level of permissions, they'll just see their login information here. They can only set up something for themselves, and that box is not editable. I can choose how to get my alerts, and our system is not set up to send text messages, so email is my only selection. And then I get to define under what conditions I want an alert. So if I leave it at all changes, I'm going to find out whenever anybody edits one of these items or even deletes an item. I really only care about when new items get added. Then I can further specify criteria. These really don't apply since I'm only being notified about new items. And I can also determine the schedule under which I'd like to get notifications. In my case, I'd like to get notified immediately, which means usually somewhere within about 5 minutes of the item being posted. Just depends on the different cycles that SharePoint is running and that your email system is running. So I'll click OK. And now whenever a new item gets posted to this list, I'll receive an email letting me know about it, and if it's something I need to take care of, I can come here and do that. One feature that I've mentioned several times in this demonstration so far is the issue of permissions. So one of the important things to know about SharePoint when you set it up and start using it is that permissions are very flexible. Which users are allowed to view information or change information or even change how a feature is set up is something that's easily managed by someone who's in a site ownership position. This can be someone in the IT department, but more typically with SharePoint, it's someone who is in charge of a site or a sub-site and is based in a non-IT area. Permissions can also be changed and granted on a very granular level. So in this section of the demonstration, I'll show you a little bit about how users and permissions are set up and some of the options you have available. To do that, I'm going to start back out at the top level of the site. So I'm going to click on Home, and I'm going to go to Site Actions, Site Permissions. Now here we see the three groups that were set up when the site collection was created: team site visitors, owners, and members. And you'll see here the permission levels that each of these groups has. So if I click on the visitors group, I'll see that all the domain users, everyone in this organization with a Windows login account, has basic view permissions on the content of the site. If I click on members, I'll see that Melissa is listed as a member, and since she has contribute permissions, this allows her to add content to this top level site. She can't change anything about how the site is set up, but she could add documents, add calendar items, that kind of thing. Looking at the owners group, there's really not a real person in the owners group. I might add someone. This might be someone in the IT department, or it could be someone in an administrative position. Right now, there's just a system account in this group, and that's okay. I'm going to go back, and there's actually a fourth group, the site collection administrators. So if I click on that, I see that this user ID called student, this is the ID we use in our classes, as well as my ID and the system account are in the site collection administrators box. The difference is the site collection administrator has full administrative control over everything in the site and cannot be locked out. As we'll see later, you can change the permissions on individual areas of the site, and while the owners group might have full control, it's possible to lock those owners out of a particular area. So you always need to have a real person, preferably 2 or 3, in your administrators group so that if something were to happen, they can always step in and restore permissions or whatever is needed. For day-to-day management of the site, these 3 groups are typical. Now you can create your own groups, and there are times when you'll need to do that, and you can create many groups. It just depends on your particular users and permissions needs, how big your site is, that kind of thing. Whenever a subsite is created, you have the option of either inheriting this users and permission structure, or you can create a custom users and permissions system for that particular subsite. And we'll see some examples of that. Before we get too far though, I want to create a custom permission level. So what you're seeing out here are 3 of the really 4 default permission levels that are typically used. Read is just what it sounds like, it's read-only permission. Contribute is what allows that uploading, editing, and deleting of content. Full control allows the user to manage everything about how the site is set up, including users and permissions. There's a 4th permission level called design that's almost full control, but someone with design permissions can't get into some of the higher administrative functions such as users and permissions. Now in our case, I have a need for a permission level that's very similar to contribute, but which does not allow the users to delete items. So what we're going to do is create a copy of the contribute permission level, make some small changes to it, and then we'll have that permission level available to apply where needed. So I'm going to click on the permission levels link up here, and here it's showing me the permission levels that exist, and I could edit them. It's usually not a good idea to edit the ones that come out of the box. If you have a slightly different need, you want to copy the one that's closest to what you'll use and then make some changes to that copy. So I'm going to click on contribute, and down here at the bottom there's a button, copy permission level, so I'll click that. And I'll give it a name. So I'm going to give it something very descriptive, contribute minus delete. And I'll give it a description. And then I can come down through the checklist of the individual types of permissions that this level grants. And I want to uncheck delete items. And I also do not want this permission level to be able to delete versions. So if there's a list or a library where versioning has been turned on, they shouldn't be able to delete those versions either. And I'll scroll down through the rest of the items, make sure there's nothing else I need to check or uncheck, and click Create. So now here's my new custom permission level, contribute minus delete. Now let's take a look at where we can apply that. I'm going to go to our IT subsite, and let's take a look at the site permissions for this subsite. I can see that it looks different. from what we saw earlier at the top level, and I even have this yellow bar across the top telling me that it has unique permissions. If I wanted this site to have exactly the same permissions as the top level, I could click this Inherit Permissions button, and it would rejoin this site with the top level site and give it the same users and permissions. In this case, I don't want to do that. I have my IT owners, so let's take a look at that. This is the IT staff only. They have ownership of this site, so anyone in the IT staff group can change how this site is set up. IT members. There are no members separate from the staff in this case. I might have all my staff in the members group and maybe only one or two people in the owners group, but this is how we've got it set up right now. I also have the team site visitors. So this is the same group that exists at the top level, but they have read permissions. So practically speaking, what this means is that anyone in the organization can come look at the information here in the IT subsite, but only the people who are on the IT staff can change the information or change how the site is set up. But that presents a problem with the request list that we just set up. So let's take a look. I want my users to be able to come to this list and add items to it. I don't want them to call or email and then have someone on the staff add the request. I want those people to be able to add their request directly. So in order to do that, I need to change the permissions for this list or library. Permissions always inherit from the level above. So by default, subsites would inherit from parent sites unless you specify that it shouldn't. And any list or library is going to inherit the users and permissions that have been set up for the site that they're on. But we can break that inheritance at any time and customize it. So in order to do that for our request list, I'll need to come to the List tab and click on List Settings. And here I have a link, Permissions for this list. So I'll click on that. And my yellow bar is telling me it's inheriting permissions from its parent, in this case the IT subsite. And you can see down here I've got the same groups with the same permission levels. I don't even have any checkboxes over here. The tools that I have at the top are much more limited, so all of those are signals that this is just showing me what this particular list has. It's not going to let me change that. So the first step in changing users and permissions is to click this Stop Inheriting button. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I get a warning dialog box. I'll click OK. So now this list has unique permissions. I have more tools available. I can now work with these groups. And all I really want to do is grant this visitors group permissions to add new items to this list. They can edit the items that they put up, but I don't want them to delete anything. So I'm going to put a check in the box next to the group name and click on Edit User Permissions. And here I see my custom permission level, contribute minus delete. I'll put a check in that box. I could leave read checked, but it's redundant, so I'm going to uncheck it, and I'll click OK. So now I see contribute minus delete is the permission level for all of my visitors, everyone in the organization. And click on the Navigate Up folder and go back to my request list. So now anyone in my organization can post a new request, but I didn't have to grant them contributor permissions to the whole site. One thing to note is that permissions can also be granted on a document by document or item by item basis. So if I were to click on the drop down for my list item here, I'd see Manage Permissions is one of my options. Same as if I go to my library. The drop down for any document has a Manage Permissions option, so you can even block or expand the permissions for individual documents and list items. SharePoint Foundation contains a search feature that can be very helpful in locating documents, especially in large websites. Also, it's important to take into consideration that different people have different methods for surfacing information. Some people are browsers, they like to drill down through information, find it logically. Other people like to just use whatever search engine's available to quickly pinpoint what they're looking for. The search feature in Foundation is not as full featured as what you'll find in Standard or Enterprise if Enterprise search is deployed, but it does work really well. At the top of most pages in SharePoint, you'll have a Search This Site dialog box. And here I am on the main page of the website, and all I need to do is click in that box and type, for example, the word bike. And I can press enter or click the little magnifying glass button, and this quickly returns items that have the word bike. Those might be list items, they might be entire sites or subsites, they might be calendar items, hyperlinks, they could be documents. So anything in this website that had the word bike in its title or in metadata is surfaced by this search. And because this site isn't well populated yet, this search only returns 7 items. But let's say I had a site that had really been built out and used over time. There was a lot of data here. Maybe I'm looking specifically for information about a specific bike called the Roadster. I could combine those terms by using a plus sign. And now I get only the items that contain both words. Going back to our example of our tutorials in the IT subsite, I might have tutorials for several versions of Microsoft Office if this site has been in use for very long. So I may be interested in an Excel tutorial, but I want to specify Excel 2010 instead of previous versions. So, as you may be familiar with other websites, I can enclose those words in quotation marks. So by searching for Excel 2010 in quotation marks, I can be sure to bring back that exact phrase as a search result. There are lots of other options for conducting search in SharePoint. The SharePoint Help feature can give you a table of all the search operators you can use. Finally, let's take a look at some of the options that you'll have for changing the look and feel of your site. That can include the content that's displayed on particular pages, as well as things like color choices. So first, let's dress up this home page a little bit. What we're going to do is change the logo and add some additional content to the home page to make it a little more useful. So to do that, I need to put this page into edit mode. There are several ways to do it, but the fastest way is just to use my little edit icon up in the ribbon area. When I put the page into edit mode, these two main sections become editable. They become clickable and kind of alive, and I can start working with them. So one thing I want to do is change the color of this title. So just like you might in a word processor, I can select that information and use my text editing tools to make it a little more interesting. Let's stick with the color scheme that we have going for the site as a whole. Have that nice plum color. And I also want to just add some text down here, a little slogan. And again, I can edit that. In addition to having the normal text editing tools, I have some styles I can work with. So I'm just going to pick this heading 1. And I also want to add an announcements list. I also want to add my announcements list to the home page. So it's already been set up. It's been renamed News You Can Use, but it's kind of hidden over here on the quick launch bar, and I want it right here on the home page. So what I'm going to do is click where I'd like for it to go and come up here to the Insert ribbon, and I can insert various things. One of those things is an existing list. Actually, an existing list or a new list, these are all web parts. But there are other web parts besides the lists and libraries that are on the site. So you can think about web parts as being modular boxes of information, and you can plop them onto a page and move them around to suit your needs. So if I click on the web part button, this gives me a list of all the web parts I can add. So by default, I'm on the lists and libraries category. So you see that all the lists and libraries that exist on this top level site are available for me to display on the home page. We already have the links list displaying over there on the right, for example. But what I want to do is add this news you can use announcements list. So I select it, and then I just click the add button, and that part of the page collapses, and now here's my news you can use list. But there's still a problem. The users would have to click on each link to read the announcement. Luckily, the announcements list has a special display property that's available that will show at least part of the announcement right on the home page. So what I'm going to do is change the setup of this web part. I'll click on the little drop down here on the title and click Edit Web Part. And this opens up a pane over on the right, and there are lots of different things I can do to control how this particular list displays on this page. But the change we're going to make is pretty simple. The current view shows the title and the modified date. It would show the attachments if there were any attachments, but I don't see who wrote it, and I don't see any of the text about the announcement. So by changing the view to something called the summary view, and I'll get a warning, I'll click OK. And when I apply that, the way the announcements displays change. I see who wrote it, when it was posted or changed, and body, or at least the first several lines of the body of the announcement itself. So now I'll click OK and take that web part out of edit mode. And now my announcements list is much more useful. I think I'll also get rid of some of this white space, make it a little more compact. Now the last thing I'm going to do on the home page is replace this logo. This is our old logo, so I'm going to take that off and put the new one on. So all I need to do is click on it and press delete on my keyboard. And now again I'm going to insert, only instead of inserting a web part, I'm going to insert a picture. Just like for uploading a document, I'll browse for my picture file, and it's this one right here. And it's going to store it in a library called Site Assets. The picture file actually has to come live on the SharePoint website somewhere. So automatically SharePoint will take care of that by putting a copy of it in this Site Assets library. I could use another library, but that's appropriate in this case. So now I'll click OK. There's metadata associated with this file that I could fill in. Again, that I could give it a title different from the file name. In this case, I don't need to do that, so I'll just click Save. And now here's my new logo in place on the home page. So now that all my changes are done, I'm going to save this just like you would any other document. I need to save it. I have a Save button up here in the ribbon area, or if I click on my Page tab, I have a Save and Close. If I needed to continue working on this, I might want to save and keep editing. But in this case, I'm finished, so I'll click Save and Close. Now, another change I'd like to make throughout the site is to add a link to my top link bar that will lead to the public version of our website. This is the intranet. I want my users, my employees, to be able to quickly link to the public website because there are areas out there they may need to refer to occasionally. In addition to being able to edit the top link bar, I can also edit the quick launch bar. So let's take a look at that. I'll go to Site Actions, Site Settings, and I'm going to edit the top link bar. So here are the links as they currently exist. SharePoint automatically added them when I created those subsites, but I could change the order that they display. Or, as we're about to do, I'm going to add a new navigation link. So I'll click that link, and it's very simple. The address for our website is awbikes.com, and I'll just give it the description AW Bikes, and I'll click OK. So now here's my link in the top link bar, and that would lead to my public website. If I wanted to change anything about the quick launch bar, I would go to Site Actions, Site Settings, and there's the quick launch link under Look and Feel. And I can see the headings, the individual links under the headings. I can change the order, I can create new headings. So I might want to have a link directly to a specific document, or I might want to change the order of the links. So let's do that. I don't have any libraries at this top level. I don't really want to get rid of that heading altogether, but I do want to kind of push it to the bottom because it's not being used right now. So I'm just going to click this change order link, and where library is currently number 2 in the headings, I'm going to make it number 4. The others adjust, and now I'll click OK. And now the order of my quick launch bar has changed. Finally, let's take a look at the theme or the color scheme that's being employed on this site. So I'm going to go to Site Actions, Site Settings, and under Look and Feel, I also have a site theme. What you see here is a list of all the themes that are available in SharePoint Foundation. Keep in mind that it is possible for a Microsoft developer to create a custom theme that might have your company colors in it, or just some other type of theme that you would find attractive and appropriate. That requires some advanced development work though, and we're just working with the out-of-the-box features. So I can click on the different theme names, and I get a representation here of what the theme looks like. I can't change anything about how the theme is set up. I could if I were in Standard or Enterprise, but here in Foundation, I just have the options as they come out of the box. So I'm going to choose this Ricasso option and click Apply. Now this may look a little garish. The truth is a lot of those themes can be a little difficult to read because of the color choices, but just keep in mind this is a demo. So I'll click on Home, and I'll see that the color scheme has changed. Now if I click on my subsites, you'll see that it's back to the default theme. So this has to be done on every subsite. So this concludes our brief demonstration of SharePoint Foundation, some of the major features you'll find. We've only scratched the surface in what SharePoint can do and how it can be customized to meet your needs.